Hello, I'm Miranda Kahn.
And I'm John Bachman. Coming up today on Newsmax Now. Some of
the top bosses at the multi-billion-dollar international soccer cartel FIFA headed back to the U.S. to face corruption charges. The latest on the FBI's investigation. And what do officials in Russia and Qatar have to do with this scandal?
And presidential candidate Marco Rubio says legal gay marriage is, quote, a real and present danger to Christianity. Will he be attacked as a hater or anti-gay or even as a bigot? Our roundtable will discuss. And Oracle CEO Larry Ellison is backing Rubio's quest for the White House in 2016. See how he's doing it now today during our campaign finance report called Money Bombs.
Newsmax Now starts right now. And welcome to this Wednesday edition of Newsmax Now.
Yeah, Miranda, international soccer fans saw this one coming from a mile away today. Some of the top bosses at the group that regulates the World Cup and other huge tournaments around the world, also billions of dollars, especially from advertisers. Many of them could be on their way back to the U.S. here, at least 6 of them to face corruption charges, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But first, unfortunately, we turn our attention back to Texas, where folks there took it on the chin again, and like a boxing match, they're getting ready for another round of severe weather today. From Houston to central Texas, roads are completely flooded in some places. Rivers are still rising and raging after days of torrential rainfall. 11 people remain missing, and at least a dozen are dead. Governor Greg Abbott says several of the deaths were due to people trying to drive through water in places like this.
In so many of the rivers across the state of Texas, we are going to continue to have rising waters. If there are rising waters, if your local elected officials tell you to evacuate, it is essential that you heed those warnings.
Well, forecasters say there's still a 20 to 40% chance of more rain and storms the rest of the week in and around Houston and into central Texas.
Those same storms are also being blamed for a deadly tornado that ripped through a northern Mexican city. At least 13 people died, dozens more are hurt. Officials in that city say about 750 homes are damaged. The area sits just across the Rio Grande from Del Rio, Texas.
The Air Force is putting the final touches on plans for a new superweapon, a computer-killing missile. According to a publication called Flight Global, the Air Force picked Lockheed Martin's Joint Air-to-Surface Missile to carry a new kind of warhead. It can knock out electronic equipment, maybe like the kind you'd find at nuclear facilities. It would also use high-power microwaves to fry computers, much like an electromagnetic pulse generated by a nuclear explosion.
The chair of the Senate's Finance Committee now demands answers after an IRS cybersecurity breach. Senator Orrin Hatch says taxpayers need to know the information they send to the IRS is secure. Yesterday, we learned about a hack where thieves hacked into IRS computers and stole private information on about 100,000 people. The IRS says it's notifying everyone affected.
The White House firing back after a federal court shoots down the president's executive orders on immigration. In a statement, the Obama administration says judges on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal in New Orleans chose to, quote, misinterpret the facts and the law in denying the government's request for a stay. The court upheld an earlier block on the president's orders by a federal judge in Texas. The president had hoped to shield millions of illegals from deportation, including Dreamers and their family members.
A former Los Angeles cop wanted for murder is now back in the U.S. after being caught in Mexico. Henry Solis was turned over to the FBI yesterday. Police in Mexico caught him near the border. He's accused of shooting a man several times during a fight back in March. It happened in a town just east of L.A. Police say he then tried to go to Mexico with the help of his father.
Statements from the Duggar patriarch have just resurfaced, and they are shedding new light on the family's ongoing molestation scandal. Jim Bob Duggar, who served as an Arkansas state representative 13 years ago, once said rape should be punishable by death. That statement was posted on a campaign website, and that was about the same time that he reportedly caught his eldest son, Josh, molesting several girls, including some of his sisters. Josh has recently apologized, saying he acted inexcusably. The admission comes after, though, the statute of limitations has expired.
Nebraska's governor blocks a repeal of his state's death penalty. Governor Pete Ricketts vetoed the repeal yesterday. He says getting rid of the death penalty sends the wrong message, but the measure passed with more than enough votes to override his veto. Lawmakers could vote again as soon as today.
And Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, also a presidential candidate, is a bit irked by some of his colleagues during his filibuster last week, or faux filibuster against the renewal of the Patriot Act. Fellow Senator Lindsey Graham was spotted rolling his eyes. Paul says that kind of reaction is insulting to members of the military wounded in combat.
I asked them what they fought for, and they said they were fighting for the Bill of Rights. And so I think it's a disservice to their memory for me to say, oh, well, I'm just going to roll my eyes and the Bill of Rights is out the window because I'm not willing to stay here on the weekend.
Well, Paul was arguing against the bulk collection data program under the Patriot Act. Some of those provisions are set to expire on Sunday night.
The FBI is investigating a threat against a flight from Taiwan that landed in LA yesterday. Officials are keeping quiet about the actual nature of that threat. They will only say it happened over the phone. The threat comes just a day after at least half a dozen other threats were made against flights at airports in New York, New Jersey, and Massachusetts. All of those, though, turned out to not be credible.
Well, it was just this time last year, a lot of folks were embroiled in World Cup fever.
Yes.
And here we are
very
a year
much.
later, 9 FIFA officials, 5 executives indicted on corruption charges by the United States.
Yeah, and Switzerland is opening up a separate probe into this.
These FIFA officials are accused of taking bribes well over $150 million. In return, they apparently got media and marketing contracts as kickbacks somehow.
Right.
A lot to come out here and as this investigation continues to unfold. And we'll talk a lot about the culture of corruption. We do talk a lot about the culture of corruption in the NFL, but here is an entirely different type of corruption.
Well, soccer is huge around the world, and it's steadily gaining popularity here in the U.S. But, you know, this was not a shocker for a lot of people that covered this. I mean, I'm not a huge soccer fan, but I've watched several stories about that when countries like Qatar, come on.
Right. When John Oliver from HBO, formerly of The Daily Show, he took on this issue a couple of weeks ago, maybe even been as recent as this week, and he gave us some insight on what's been taking place inside FIFA. Let's take a listen.
If you don't know who Sepp Blatter is, think of Roger Goodell. And now, think of Roger Goodell's That is Sepp Blatter. Because this is a man who in the past has suggested increasing the popularity of women's soccer by having them wear tighter shorts, overseen an organisation that's been plagued by numerous scandals.
So that's just some insight. And that guy, Sepp Blatter, who runs FIFA, he was not arrested in this probe, and he was not apparently part of the investigation, at least from what I read earlier today. But when you have the other top bosses going down in this type of fashion, the FBI usually doesn't miss the mark if they're going to go through the trouble. And going into a foreign country like this in Switzerland and pulling, you know, in these arrests, it's
of all places, yeah.
I've been reading story after story about this, and it's just, it seems, I don't know, I could be wrong, but unprecedented for corruption in the sporting world. But what we're learning is this type of corruption goes much deeper than that. And
yeah, this didn't just happen last year or the year prior to that. This has been going on forever. I mean, I've seen a lot of interviews with some of these soccer players that were paid quite a bit to, you know, I just won't make this pass.
You mentioned,
I just won't make this goal. I mean, this is not new, and they admitted to it.
We're talking about billions of dollars at stake here. And Oliver also talked about Sepp Blatter a little bit more, and the issue with Qatar being allowed to host the World Cup, not next time, but the following World Cup after it's going to be hosted in Russia. Let's take a listen.
The only place less appropriate to host a World Cup would be the actual surface of the sun. Although, to be fair, the sun does have a much better human rights record than Qatar does. And yet, despite all of this, the crazy thing is, Sepp Blatter is widely expected to win re-election, even though a hairless bear would do less damage as president.
I don't necessarily understand the hairless bear reference, but
it is hot in Qatar, to say the least.
Yeah, that's and when this was first announced at the ceremony where they announced where the World Cup is going to be held, of course, the representatives from Qatar were very excited, but everybody else, you saw the look on their faces, complete shock that that country would be able to host that, let alone how the world is going to be able to get there to...
Because what, it's going to be like 115 degrees in the shade?
That's the average temperature.
It's going to be pretty hot. It's going to be hot. That's why the whole reference to the only place hotter would actually be like, what, the surface of the sun or...
But the temperature is just such a small part of the bigger issue.
No, they've done stories about this. They have actually paid people to come to the country and then to basically become
human rights question there. We're going to talk more about these FIFA Reds, how they have spread from Switzerland to South Florida. the story grows, and we'll be back with more here on Newsmax Now.